2 weeks ago, I came to the floor to talk about the threat that is posed to all of us by the Zika virus. Since then, more than 3,500 Americans have contracted this terrible virus. Unborn babies have been put at risk for a serious medical condition called microcephaly. That's a condition, I will tell you this as a doctor, where babies are born with smaller heads and with brain development problems. Adults can be paralyzed and even killed by this virus. So here we are, ready to vote in the next 15 minutes on an appropriations bill that is supposed to do something about this virus, this Zika virus. But how are the Democrats responding? Well, they're peddling myths and they're playing politics. That's what they do. They already blocked this legislation once, and now they're ready to block it again. It's unbelievable. This legislation includes $1.1 billion to fight Zika. The head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said it would fund all of the agency's immediate needs in the fight against Zika at this point. Well, when the Senate voted on this in May, every Democrat in the body voted to support the exact same amount of money. 2 months ago, Democrats thought that this was the right answer. But now they are willing to let the American people suffer because of this virus. What happened? What changed in the last 2 months that would have the Democrats who voted for it now vote against it? Nothing's changed, except that the situation has actually gotten worse, more dangerous for people. And I think the Democrats were never serious about wanting to do anything at all. Democrats decided that they would rather have a political issue than have a real solution. Democrats aren't going to be able to dodge responsibility this time, Madam President. We're running out of time to prevent an epidemic. Last week, Senator Bill Nelson from Florida said we're at the 11th hour and the 59th minute. It's exactly right. So then why are Senator Nelson and his Democrat colleagues playing a game of chicken with the American people? There was a poll that came out last week from the Kaiser Family Foundation. Found that 76% of Americans support this legislation that we have on the floor, this Zika legislation. Democrats ought to start listening to the American people. They should stop playing political games and take the money that they asked for, that the Center for Disease Control says is the right amount of money, to fight the spread of this threat to the health of the American people. But, Madam President, this is not the first time that Democrats in this body have put their own political talking points ahead of the American people in terms of their health care. The beginning of this year, Republicans passed legislation to repeal the president's health care law. Why? So we can replace it with health care reforms that work for the American people. We want to act, and we acted to protect the American people from a health care law that has harmed so many people across the country. So many people feel that it has absolutely punished them. Punished them. President Obama vetoed the legislation, and Democrats in Congress resisted every attempt to undo years of damage caused by Obamacare. Republicans offered solutions. Democrats just want to try to preserve the president's legacy no matter what. Democrats are totally ignoring all of the chaos and all of the harm that's being caused by this health care law. Taxpayers paid to set up 23 different insurance co-ops across the country. 16 of them have now folded. Only a third of the original co-ops are still operating. Billions of dollars in government taxpayer money wasted, never to be paid back. And more than 850,000 Americans have lost their insurance that they got through the co-ops because the insurance co-ops can't afford to stay in business under the health care law. The co-op in Illinois just collapsed this week. It's the president's home state. Last week it was co-ops in Oregon and Connecticut, and yet the senator from Connecticut comes down to the floor and says that the health care law is working. It is not, even in his home state. There are more than 20,000 people in Oregon who've been left scrambling to find new coverage starting July 31st, just a couple of weeks from now. It's not just people who belong to the co-ops who are losing their insurance. The largest insurance company in Minnesota says that they're going to stop selling insurance in that state at the end of the year. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota covers over 100,000 people. All of them are going to lose their insurance and have to find coverage elsewhere. President Obama said if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. Not for the people in Oregon, not for the people in Illinois. not for the people in Connecticut, not for the people in Minnesota. Now, Americans who don't lose their insurance, they're going to have to get ready to pay a lot more for it next year, even if they can keep what they have. They sure don't like it, Mr. President. More companies have been saying how much they plan to charge next year, and the numbers are staggering. In Montana, Blue Cross Blue Shield just announced on Friday that it's raising Obamacare rates 62%. Who can afford that? It's incredible. And the president has the nerve to call it the Affordable Care Act and to tell members of the Senate that they should forcefully defend and be proud. There is very little to be proud of, Madam President. It's happening all across the country because of this law. Premiums are skyrocketing. So are deductibles. So are copays. Every other cost that people pay out of pockets for their health care is going up. All of this since Obamacare went into effect. And it's because of Obamacare. I read a story the other day. It said before Obamacare, for every doctor, there were 6 administrators out there trying to administer health care in the country in terms of doing the paperwork, pushing the paper around. Now it's 9 for every 1 doctor. So we've gone from 6 to 9 administrators for every 1 doctor practicing medicine. Look, people across the country are rejecting what President Obama is continuing to claim is working well. You know, just before the 4th of July, we learned that 1.6 million people who signed up this year for Obamacare have already quit by the end of March. They signed up beginning of the year, quit by the end of March. 1.6 million. The Congressional Budget Office said that they were expecting by this time over 21 million people to sign up for Obamacare. Well, more and more dropouts, we're at only half that number. And it's just more evidence that the president's health care law is cratering, it is collapsing. Look, there's so much bad news out of this Obamacare information that we continue to have that the White House feels they can't hide it any longer, so they dribble it out over the 4th of July weekend, right before the 4th of July when people are paying attention to other things, because they don't want the world to know how badly this is actually working. But yet what the president says is forcefully defend and be proud. The president is ignoring the fact that 1.6 million people who've already signed up for his listened to him this year and signed up, they've already gotten out of it because it's a bad deal. He totally ignores the 850,000 Americans who've lost their insurance because of his failed co-ops. Instead, he actually wrote an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association patting himself on the back, congratulating himself, that came out this Monday on how great he thinks this health care law is. It is delusional for him to think that. It is ignoring the reality of what the American people see. It says he is living in a cocoon of self-delusion. That's what we're seeing across the country, the president ignoring the facts. In the article, the president actually says that the health care law should be expanded, he said, by offering government-run health insurance plans. If President Obama and the Democrats in Congress think that America needs more government control, more control over people's health care, they are really out of touch with reality.
Madam President, I wonder if
Senator from Mississippi.
I wonder if the senator would yield for a question.
Most certainly.
The senator makes an excellent point about the tremendous cost increases that American taxpayers, that American medical consumers have experienced, and also the number of insurers who are just leaving the scheme altogether. And so Americans really are not any better off. And I appreciate the gentleman coming to the floor time and again with the facts on this. But in particular, I want to go back to a point that the gentleman made with regard to what we're going to vote on in a few minutes. Do I understand from my friend from Wyoming that we will soon be voting on, at the top of the hour, we'll be voting on a proposal that funds the Zika disease at an amount that the CDC says is necessary, and at an amount that our friends on the Democratic side have argued for and voted for time and again. Do I understand that to be correct?
Madam President, the distinguished senator from Mississippi understands correctly, because at this point, the request and what the Democrats voted for earlier this year, $1.1 billion, which is what the Centers for Disease Control says is the correct amount, the Democrats are now seeming to vote against. They voted against it earlier this week.
And this very bill that we'll be voting on funds Zika at that amount.
At the amount requested by the
At the amount requested by the CDC. Now, and I was disappointed to hear the gentleman say that he believes Democrats will come in and once again block this funding this afternoon. If that happens, when will be the next opportunity that this body will have to vote on this vital funding?
Well, I think, Madam President, we're talking about at least 7 weeks from now, but if the Democrats don't change their tune, there's a lot of damage that's going to occur over that period of time. It's time to kill the mosquitoes now. Because remember, and as my colleague knows from Mississippi, it's the mosquitoes that carry the virus. The virus that, if bitten and that person gets that virus, it can cause all these very consequential health impacts to babies who are yet to be born, as well as to adults.
Well, I would just observe, and there may be others that want to speak in the very short time we have. I would just observe, Madam President, that we have a bill before us that gives the administration what they've been requesting, that gives our friends on the Democratic side of the aisle what they have asked for time and time again, saying that the Senate should act. We have an opportunity to do that today and to leave here with a victory for health care and a victory for the American people. And yet, if we do not act, as it appears we will not, because Democrats will come in and object and not give us the 60 votes, then it's going to be a month and a half to 2 months before we can provide the funding for this vital disease prevention legislation. So I would just say that I would call on my colleagues here at the 11th hour to reconsider their position. Let's go out for the conventions with a positive note and give the American people the funding that the experts in our government tell us is necessary. And I'll yield back to the gentleman and thank him for yielding the time.
Well, I appreciate so much, Madam President, the comments by the senator from Mississippi, who is absolutely right, because there are two components of this. One is to kill the mosquitoes now. The other thing we need to move ahead with, is coming up with a vaccine that people can use to help prevent this virus from taking hold if they happen to be bitten by a mosquito. So we need to do two things. We need the research, but we need to kill the mosquitoes now. It was astonishing. One of the Democrats was opposed to the fact that we wanted to do is make it easier to spray to kill the mosquitoes because you have to spray near water. Well, that's where mosquitoes tend to multiply. It's where the mosquitoes breed. It's where that Zika virus gets transformed. But they were so concerned that there would be a regulation that for a short period of time would be laid aside. You'd still have to use only the things that have been properly approved to spray. We're spraying near water. I mean, it seems like the Democrats were willing to line up with the mosquitoes instead of the people being bitten by the mosquitoes. I mean, this is how ludicrous this has gotten, Madam President. The money requested by the CDC, the right amount of money, is here on the floor to be voted on today. You've got to get the research going. You've got to spray and kill the mosquitoes. But once again, the Democrats seem to rather have a political issue than a solution. I would recommend that the Democrats come out of that lunch meeting that they're having now with their nominee for president, Hillary Clinton. They're not on the floor defending themselves. They're out there visiting with Hillary Clinton. They need to come to the floor of the Senate and vote to approve this legislation today to get the money to the Centers for Disease Control, to do the research, to kill the mosquitoes. We are offering solutions, Madam President. Republicans are here offering solutions. Democrats are offering gridlock and the same old political games. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.